It continues to grow and develop, but its growth and development is highly dependent upon its realization that while it is distinct and individual, it is also but one manifestation of the soul. To the extent that it realizes this, it learns to unfold in creativity and to use those abilities that lie inherent within it. Now, unfortunately, it would be much easier simply to tell you that your individuality continues to exist and let it go at that. While this would make a fairly reasonable parable, it has been told in that particular way before, and there are dangers in the very simplicity of the tale. The truth is that the personality you are now, and the personality that you have been and will be, in the terms in which you understand time, all of these personalities are manifestations of the soul of your soul. Your soul, therefore, the soul that you are, the soul that you are part of, that soul is a far more creative and miraculous phenomena than you have previously supposed. And when this is not clearly understood, and when the concept is watered down for simplicity's sake, as mentioned earlier, then the intense vitality of the soul can never be understood. Your soul, therefore, possesses the wisdom, information, and knowledge that is part of the experience of all these other personalities, and you have within yourself access to this information, but only if you realize the true nature of your reality. Let me emphasize again that these personalities exist independently within and are a part of the soul, and each of them are free to create and develop. There is, however, an inner communication, and the knowledge of one is available to any, not after physical death, but now, in your present moment. Now the soul itself, as mentioned earlier, is not static. It grows and develops even through the experiences of those personalities that compose it, and it is, to put it as simply as possible, more than the sum of its parts. Now, there are no closed systems in reality. In your physical system, the nature of your perceptions limits your ideas of reality to some extent, because you purposely decide to focus within a given locale. But basically speaking, consciousness can never be a closed system, and all barriers of such a nature are illusion. Therefore, the soul itself is not a closed system. When you consider the soul, however, you usually think of it in such a light, unchanging, a psychic or spiritual citadel. But citadels not only keep out invaders, they also prevent expansion and development. There are many matters here very difficult to express in words, for you are so afraid of your sense of identity that you resist the idea that the soul, for example, is an open spiritual system, a powerhouse of creativity that shoots out in all directions, and yet this is indeed the case. I tell you this, and at the same time remind you that your present personality is never lost. Now, another word for the soul is entity. You see, it is not a simple matter of giving you a definition of a soul or entity, for even to have a glimpse in logical terms you would have to understand it in spiritual, psychic, and electromagnetic terms, and understand the basic nature of consciousness and action as well. But you can intuitively discover the nature of the soul or entity, and in many ways, intuitive knowledge is superior to any other kind. One prerequisite for such an intuitive understanding of the soul is the desire to achieve it. If the desire is strong enough, then you will be automatically led to experiences that will result in vivid, unmistakable, subjective knowledge. There are methods that will enable you to do this, and I will give you some toward the end of this book. For now, here is one quite effective but simple exercise. Close your eyes after having read this chapter to this point, and try to sense within yourself the source of power from which your own breathing and life forces come. Some of you will do this successfully at your first try, others may take longer. When you feel within yourself this source, then try to sense this power flow outward through your entire physical being, through the fingertips and toes, through the pores of your body, all directions, with yourself as center. Imagine the rays undiminished, reaching then through the foliage and the clouds above, through the center of the earth below, extending even to the furthest reaches of the universe. Now, I do not mean this to be merely a symbolic exercise, for though it may begin with imagination, it is based upon fact, and emanations from your consciousness, and the creativity of your soul do indeed reach outward in that manner. The exercise will give you some idea of the true nature, creativity, and vitality of the soul from which you can draw your own energy, and of which you are an individual and unique portion. This discussion is not meant to be an esoteric presentation with little practical meaning in your daily lives. The fact is that while you hold limited concepts of your reality, then you cannot practically take advantage of many abilities that are your own. And while you have a limited concept of the soul, then to some extent you cut yourself off from the source of your own being and creativity. Now, these abilities operate whether you know it or not, but often they operate in spite of you rather than with your conscious cooperation. And often when you do find yourself using them, you become frightened, disoriented, or confused. No matter what you have been taught, you must understand, for example, that basically speaking, perceptions are not physical in the way the term is usually used. If you catch yourself perceiving information through other than your physical senses, then you must accept the fact that this is the way perception works. What often happens is that your conception of reality is so limited that you take fright whenever you perceive any experience that does not fit into your conception. Now, I am not speaking merely of abilities loosely called extrasensory perception. These experiences seem extraordinary to you only because you have for so long denied the existence of any perception that did not come through the physical senses. So-called extrasensory perception gives you but a crude and distorted idea of the basic ways in which the inner self receives information. But the concepts built around extrasensory perception are at least nearer the truth, and as such represent an improvement over the idea that all perception is basically physical. Now, it is nearly impossible to separate a discussion of the nature of the soul from a discussion of the nature of perception. Very briefly, let us review a few points. You form physical matter in the physical world that you know. The physical senses actually can be said to create the physical world, in that they force you to perceive an available field of energy in physical terms, and impose a highly specialized pattern upon this field of reality. Using the physical senses, you can perceive reality in no other way. The physical perception in no way alters the native, basic, unfettered perception that is characteristic of the inner self being the portion of the soul that is within you. The inner self knows its relationship with the soul. It is a portion of the self that acts, you might say, as a messenger between the soul and the present personality. You must also realize that while I use terms like soul or entity, inner self, and present personality, I do so only for the sake of convenience, for one is a part of the other. There is no point where one begins and the other ends. You can see this easily for yourself if you consider the way in which psychologists use the term ego, subconscious, and even unconscious. What seems subconscious in one instant may be conscious the next. An unconscious motive may also be conscious at one point. Even in these terms, your experience should tell you that the words themselves make divisions that do not exist in your own experience.